everyone. Wishing you a very good morning. I'm Dr. Neha Khodke and today we will be seeing a case of anemia solved with homeopathy. Yes, anemia, a case or a condition which is generally linked to a deficiency. But we will see the entire case history and evolution of this case and see what was the final remedy that we gave, why we gave that final remedy, and what was the outcome. Let's start. A 51-year-old female homemaker, married since 30 years, came to the clinic. So these were her primary complaints. She did not come complaining of anemia. She came complaining of certain symptoms. These were the symptoms: cramps in the legs and pain since 3 years. The pain was continuous and she did not find any relief whatsoever. Her weight had increased from 45 kgs to 75 kgs in the past 3 years, which means on an average she had gained 10 kgs in a year. She had breathlessness on exertion, which was aggravated on climbing the stairs. However, she did not give any history of asthma. There were recurrent, painful mouth ulcers since 3 years. She also complained of bloating, eructations and acidity since 3 years, burning in the abdomen with no desire to eat. There were occasional episodes of bleeding with stools since 3 years, aggravated on passing hard stools, and there was also a mild itching around the anus. Now these were her basic chief complaints. If you look at the cramps, if you look at the breathlessness on exertion, all of this can be attributed to anemia. But we will see going forward what all happens. In her physical generals, her appetite is reduced and there is easy satiety. So if she eats just a little amount of food, she feels full. She likes salty food. She dislikes spicy food because they aggravate her mouth ulcers or they increase the pain. She is a very thirsty person and tends to have large quantities of room temperature water. Stool is hard and she has to strain. There are no complaints in urination. Sleep is good and refreshing. Unremembered and unremarkable dreams. And perspiration is moderate, non-offensive and non-staining. Now these are her thermal reactions. She cannot tolerate cold weather. She always needs a covering on her body. She does not like the draft of air through the fan. Bathes with hot water throughout the year. So basically all of these reactions of hers point out to the fact that she is a chilly patient. There is no sun aggravation. So we just did a slight inquiry into any other impressions that cause a sensitivity in her. So as far as the sun is concerned, there is no aggravation, but the slightest noise brings on headache. So she is sensitive to very slight and little noises also. She is menopausal since the age of 45. There was a history of menorrhagia and she has one child which was a full-term normal delivery, a daughter. Okay, now this is her life situation. So we saw what her physical complaints were. She complained of cramps. She complained of acidity and burning in the abdomen. She also complained of breathlessness on exertion and bleeding per rectum or bleeding PR, especially when passing hard stool. She is a chilly patient and in her physical generals, the characteristic symptoms that we found out were that her appetite was reduced and there was easy satiety. Her thirst, on the other hand, was increased, and she liked to have salty food, or her preferences in food were of the salty variety, and a slightest noise would aggravate her and give rise to a headache. Now, looking at her life situation and evolution, in any patient, we try to get the life situation right from childhood. Now, in the case of a person who is 50, 55 years old, sometimes it is not possible to get an in-depth information about their childhood. So whatever we can acquire is what we should note down and consider in our final totality. So here's what we found. The patient lives with her husband. Her daughter is married and she is 28 years old. She comes from a lower middle class family. The patient was the third child in the family. And this is what she said. I am an unwanted child because my parents wanted a son. I have two elder sisters, and when I was small, I was not given any attention. I did not feel loved, not even by my mother. I was not educated, and I was married off at the age of 21 years. My husband made it clear at the time of getting married that he was marrying me under pressure. He was in love with someone else but had to marry me because she belonged to a different community. I was hurt at that time. So we try and get her feelings. I was hurt at that time, but now I'm okay. She's a very affectionate person. She's very attached to her daughter because she says that she is the only one who has truly loved me. So if you see the evolution of this patient, she comes from a background or a family where she always felt unloved because she was an unwanted child, and she had that feeling of rejection or unwantedness even after she got married. Right now, she is teaching sewing to 25 girls so that they become independent. I want them to become self-sufficient. I don't want them to suffer in future. She is extremely talkative, kept talking continuously during the case taking. Very cheerful person. She was continually laughing and making jokes. She's a strong-willed person. Says, I do not worry about anything. Whatever has to happen will happen and I will find a way. So if you can think about how this person has evolved from childhood to adulthood, she comes from a background where she did not feel loved, where she did not get attention. She went into a second background where there was a similar picture. So now what is she doing? Now she is showing that in the form of affection. She is compensating in the form of sympathy, and at the same time she is an extremely strong-willed person as well. Alright, now these were her examination findings. Out of the entire case history that I have just narrated, I hope that you are noting down all the symptoms and the characteristics that you feel are relevant to this case and relevant to be considered in the final totality and in the final prescription. Now, when it comes to a person like this who is saying that she has um, shortness of breath on exertion, it's very important to do a clinical examination, because when we talk about shortness of breath, we can think of different causes or different reasons why this shortness of breath can occur. The commonest of which lie in the respiratory and in the cardiac sphere. Okay, so in the respiratory sphere, we have asthma, we have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD. In the case of a cardiac cause, if we look at, then there is congestive heart failure. Okay, so all of these things we need to consider and examine, because for a shortness of breath on exertion, In a menopausal 51-year-old woman, we need to be very, very careful before we go ahead, because we need to find out what is the exact cause for this symptom that she is suffering from. Okay. Now on examination, her pulse was 70 beats per minute, blood pressure 125/80, which is within the normal range, respiratory rate 14 per minute, again within the normal range. However, conjunctiva were pale, nails were brittle and had some white spots on them. On observation, there was a reddish discoloration of face easily, especially while laughing. On observation, there was a reddish discoloration of face easily, especially while laughing. Systemically, the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, and the central nervous system were absolutely normal on examination. Tongue was pale and smooth, and at the rectum, because she complained of bleeding PR, at the rectum there were second stage hemorrhoids at the 3 o'clock position. So again, when we talk about bleeding PR, sometimes it is a one-off case where there is bleeding PR because of a hard stool. But in this patient where she had recurrent episodes, it's important to find out the cause. And the commonest cause are fissures and piles. In this case, it was piles or hemorrhoids. We also had certain reports that she had brought. Now, she was also a patient, if you remember, who had suddenly gained a lot of weight in the past 3 years. Again, for a menopausal woman to gain weight, so after menopause, it is common to see a woman gaining weight, but at such a scale or so fast is a little abnormal, which is why we told her to do her thyroid checkup. But her thyroid profile was absolutely normal, as you can see here in this picture. But her complete blood count showed a hemoglobin of 9.2. Now, although the range or the normal range given here is 11.5, ideally the range should lie between 12 and 16 for a woman. In her case, it was quite low, which is 9.2. All the other parameters were absolutely normal. Okay, so her final diagnosis that we found is anemia, hemorrhoids and obesity. Now, even when it comes to anemia, it is important to identify why this anemia has occurred. And if you see that all these problems are arising only since 3 years, before that, she never complained of any such problems. So what could be the possible cause of the anemia? What could be the possible cause of the hemorrhoids? Now, the anemia could be a product of the chronic blood loss that has happened over time because of the piles. And the piles or the hemorrhoids could be because of the constipation. Now we can clinically correlate the shortness of breath on exertion to this anemia as well as to the excessive weight gain that she has suffered from. So in a case of dyspnea or shortness of breath on exertion, the cause may not necessarily be a cardiac cause or a respiratory cause. It could also be a metabolic cause. It could also be due to deficiency. Now here, both the causes are simultaneously occurring in her. So the obesity is also there and the anemia is also there. And on examination, we saw that the cardiovascular system had no problem on clinical examination. So we attribute this shortness of breath to anemia and to her excessive weight gain. Okay. Now we see the Hahnemannian classification of disease is dynamic, chronic, miasmatic disease with fully developed symptoms. Now let us have a look at the totality of symptoms that we have considered for this case. Alright, so if you see, we are now looking more at the mentals as well as the physical generals of this case. Because if you see the symptoms are explained by the diagnosis that we have found. So how do we differentiate? Because there will be a lot of remedies that cover anemia. There will be a lot of remedies that will cover obesity. But what we actually need is to know how to differentiate between the different remedies that are good for anemia and the different remedies that are good for obesity. And that differentiation can be found in the mental and the physical generals of the patient. So this is the totality that we have taken. She's an extremely sympathetic person. She's affectionate, cheerful. This is an attribute. Talkative, sensitive to the slightest noise. Now here we start with the physical general. Sensitive to the slightest noise. We have taken this because it denotes her level of sensitivity, which is quite high. Increased thirst for large quantities of water, a desire for salty food, easy satiety. So this is a type of reduced appetite, easy satiety. That is why we have not taken appetite reduced. We have taken something more specific, which is easy satiety. She is a chilly patient, again taken because it's a characteristic thermal reaction, and we have taken one physical particular, which is a red discoloration of face, which we found very characteristic in this case. Now all of these symptoms that we have considered in the totality are something that you will not see in all cases of anemia or all cases of obesity. So this is the totality that is really going to help us to lead to the correct remedy. Now going in for the approach, if you see, we have more of mental and physical general characteristics, and that is why we will rely on and we will go in for Kent's approach. So we choose to go forward with Kent's approach for this case because it has abundant characteristic mental symptoms and physical generals. So now I will be showing you the rubric or the repertorial representation of each symptom in the form of a rubric from Kent's repertory because we are using his approach today. Okay, so sympathetic becomes a literal and a very straightforward transition into sympathetic from the mind chapter of Kent's repertory. The next symptom is affectionate. Again, a very literal translation into affectionate from mind chapter of Kent's repertory. Talkative becomes loquacity. Cheerful, cheerful, gay, happy from the mind chapter of Kent's repertory. And sensitive to slightest noise. So we have a very specific and a direct rubric for this. Sensitive, oversensitive, noise to slightest from the mind chapter of Kent's repertory. Then we go in for the increased thirst, a very specific form of thirst, thirst for large quantities of water, which we will find in the stomach chapter of Kent's repertory as thirst, large quantities for. Craving for salty food becomes desire for salt things from the stomach chapter of Kent's repertory. Easy satiety. So there is a rubric in the stomach chapter of Kent's repertory called appetite, easy satiety. And finally, we have chilly patient. Chilly patient we will apply as a filter when we go in for the final repertorization. And the last rubric is discoloration red, which is there in the face chapter of Kent's repertory. So this is our totality. I will repeat it if you like. The first rubric is sympathetic, affectionate, followed by loquacity, cheerful, gay, happy, sensitive, oversensitive, noise to slightest. Now these first 5 rubrics have been taken from the mind chapter of Kent's repertory. Then we start with the stomach chapter. Thirst, large quantities for. Desire for salt things. Appetite, easy satiety. So the next three rubrics are from the stomach chapter. The final is the thermal modality, which will be applied as a repertorization filter, and then face discoloration red. Okay, so now let us start recording these rubrics. Alright, let us record the first rubric, which is sympathetic. Okay, now I will be using a very easy feature to record the first three rubrics of sympathetic, affectionate and loquacity or talkativeness. I will be using the quick symptom record feature. Now the quick symptom record feature is like a direct conversion within the software from symptom to rubric. So you have to look for the symptom, and against that symptom there will be one or more than one rubrics that are already linked within the software from the different repertories that are present, and all we need to do is select and record what we feel is the most relevant rubric for that symptom. Alright, now to access the quick symptom record, all you have to do is press Command K from the keyboard. This is a shortcut for the quick symptom record. What you see on the left hand side is a list in which all the symptoms have been categorized into different chapters. Alright, what we have to do is just type and search for the symptoms that we are looking for. So the first symptom that we are looking for is sympathetic. Now in this search bar we type, let's just type it as a partial word, sympath, and I press enter. Now I see that there are two results for this. The first result is under personality type, which is sympathetic, and the second are emotions or feelings, under which there is a desire for sympathy. What we are looking for is sympathetic, which is already selected, and against that we see four rubrics, two from complete, one from Kent and one from Phatak. Since we have applied Kent's approach in this case, let's record the rubrics from Kent's repertory. So now I just check the box that is present against Kent Mind Sympathetic, and that rubric is recorded. The next rubric or the next symptom that we have to record is affectionate. So again, in this search bar, I start typing. So let me again type the partial word, which is affection, press enter, and I see a few results: clinical, physical and mind. What I'm interested is the last one, that is mind, personality type, affectionate. So I select it. Against that again I see four rubrics, two from complete, one from Kent and one from BBCR. I will be recording the one or the rubric from Kent. Now if I want to see which remedies are there in the rubric of Kent's repertory, I just click on that rubric. A small pop-up window will open in which I can see all the remedies that feature in that rubric. Now I record this rubric by checking the box, and it's done. The final symptom that I want to record using the quick symptom record is loquacity or talkativeness. Now not everyone will know that talkative is represented as loquacious or loquacity in the final repertories that we have. So that is why we have included the symptom talkative here in this list. So all I need to do is type talkative, And now I get that personality type as talkative. If you see against talkative, all the rubrics that are present have the word locacity in them. So you know that talkativeness is represented as locacity in all of our repertories. Again, I record the rubric from Kent's repertory. That's the second rubric in this list. I check the box and now it's recorded as well. So up till now, we have recorded three rubrics: sympathetic, affectionate and talkative or locacity. Let's record the next rubrics. We'll be recording the next three rubrics using repertory search. Now the repertory search is like a Google search engine which will look for the rubric from all the repertories that are present in the software. And it's the easiest form of looking for a rubric in case you don't know where that particular rubric is present or which represents or which repertory represents it best. All right. The next rubric we are looking for is cheerful. Now we know in this case that we will be recording all the rubrics from Kent's repertory. But let me just show you how this search engine runs. All you have to do is press Command S from the keyboard. A small pop-up window opens and in this you have to type the keyword that you're looking for. So for us it is now cheerful. So let's type cheerful. Now on pressing enter, what I see that there are more than 600 rubrics that I have seen or that the software has thrown back at me for the keyword cheerful. I only am interested in those references that are there in Kent's repertory. So from the list on the left, I click on Kent and now I see only those rubrics containing the word cheerful from Kent's repertory, out of which I will be recording the first rubric, which is Kent, Mind, Cheerful, Gay, Happy. I check the box and the rubric is now recorded. The other rubric I want to record is, if you remember in the totality, sensitive to the slightest noise. Now again I do a Command S. I don't have to type all the keywords that are there in the rubric. Just one or two will suffice. So let me just put slightest noise and I click enter. There are 63 references for slightest noise. If I click on the reference for Kent, I see that there is only one reference in the entire repertory from Kent, which is mind, sensitive, oversensitive, noise to slightest, with 18 remedies in it. I check the box and now this rubric is recorded as well. Okay, the next rubric is increase thirst for large quantities of water. Again, we don't have to look for all the keywords or we don't have to type all the keywords. Just a few keywords will also do. Command S again. Let me just type thirst space large. There are 150 rubrics for thirst and large keywords. If I go in for the references from Kent, okay, I see that there are 4 references and all are for thirst, large quantities. The first rubric is what I'm looking for: stomach, thirst, large quantities for. You check the box and it's recorded. So it is as simple as that. We still have 3 more rubrics to go. And I will be recording these 3 rubrics using the classic way of recording, which is to actually go into the chapter of the repertory and look for the rubric. So to access the repertory or to open any chapter of any repertory, what you need to do is press Command O from the keyboard and now the repertory list opens to your left and on the right the chapter that is selected is displayed. By default, The chapter that is displayed is the mind chapter of complete repertory, but we are looking for the stomach chapter now of Kent's repertory because we want to record the rubric of desire for salt. So what I will do is, in this search bar here on the left hand side, I just type in stomach. Okay, and the list of repertory chapters drills down to show me only those repertories that have the chapter on stomach. Since I am interested in Kent, I select Kent and the stomach chapter of Kent opens. Now in this, I am looking for two rubrics, a desire for salt and easy satiety. So first, when I'm looking for desire for salt, just start typing. It's very simple. Desire space salt. And as you can see in the results, there is only one rubric, which is desire salt things. We can record the rubric from here, or if you would like to see which remedies are there in that rubric, just click on the rubric once. And the software will directly jump to that rubric in the stomach chapter and show you which are the 30 remedies in that rubric. I will now record this rubric from here by checking the box against it. The next rubric is easy satiety. Now, ideally speaking, easy satiety comes under appetite reduced. But here we just type in easy satiety and now the software will directly jump to those words. So, easy, alright, I just typed easy and now I have 4 references: appetite easy satiety, vomiting easy, appetite easy satiety morning, and appetite easy satiety evening. So I will record the rubric that is there first in this reference list, having 67 remedies, appetite easy satiety. I just check the box and the rubric is recorded. The final rubric that I want to record is a red discoloration of the face, which I will see in the face chapter of Kent's repertory. So again, in the search box on the left, I type face. I see the references for face chapter in different repertories and I select Kent face. And in here I type red. That's it, just one keyword. And I see the references for that. The first reference is what I'm looking for. Discoloration red. Check the box and it is recorded. So now I have recorded all 9 rubrics from Kent's repertory for my case. Let me have a look now at all the remedies that are represented in this repertorization sheet. To have a look at the repertorization sheet, go to the first icon in the black toolbar on the left, which is of View Repertorization. You can also press Command R from the keyboard and the repertorization sheet will open. Now, as you see in the repertorization sheet, there are 278 remedies that are represented from all the rubrics that we have recorded from Kent's repertory, phosphorus coming first and representing all the 9 rubrics that we have recorded, followed by natrium that has 8 rubrics that have been represented. So, sensitive to slightest noise is the only rubric that natrium has not represented in Kent. We still have a repertorization filter to apply, which is for chilly patient. And for this, we need to apply the filter of remedy property. The remedy property filter is the second icon on the left in the filters toolbar. So I select remedy property filter and here in the thermal state I select chilly. You can also select any other parameters that you want. Okay. Now in this case, let us select chronic stage of disease as well, and we'll see what are the remedies that come up. I click on apply, and now if you see, I just have phosphorus, which is covering all the rubrics that I have. Natrium has completely disappeared. Now, for a lot of us, this can be a little disturbing, because if you see the trend of the case, natrium is a remedy that we can think of. But here, because of the chili filter that we applied, natrium is not there. Alright, so we have just phosphorus over here. Now, the interesting thing is, let's have a look at what phosphorus represents, and let's have a look at also what natrium represents, because if you see the case, natrium also figures in the entire totality or the evolution that we have seen in this patient. Okay, if you look at the periodic table, now the periodic table has been divided into rows and into columns. Have a look at the third row. The third row has natrium or sodium, magnesium, aluminium, silica, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine and argon. Now this is the entire row, and the entire row as well represents a certain theme. Every row of homeopathic remedies in the periodic table of elements, every column represents a certain theme. Let us have a look at this theme. So the third row remedies are mainly concerned with relationships and interpersonal relationships. Another theme that runs very closely through this entire row is the theme of sympathy. Either they are very sympathetic people or they desire a lot of sympathy. But sympathy runs through this row of remedies. And the third is communication. Communication is also a keyword for this third row. But if you see that the remedies on the left side of the periodic table, let's have a look again at the periodic table. The remedies on the left side, like aluminium, magnesium and sodium, are the remedies that have lack of communication. Whereas silica has both lack of communication and extremely communicative as well, depending on whether silica is in a compensatory or compensated stage or a decompensated stage. So the remedies to the right of the periodic table, like phosphorus, sulfur and chlorine, these are the remedies that are excessively communicative. So you will find these remedies in loquacious or talkative rubrics in the repertories. So this is the theme of the third row of remedies, and this entire theme can be seen in this patient of ours of anemia. Now, if you look specifically at natrium and phosphorus, many of you may say that she has some features of magnesium as well. But yes, so magnesium has that feeling of being an unwanted child, abandonment, but the excessive loquacity that you see, the excessive desire for communicating is not there in magnesium. Now, here's a look at the natrium group of remedies. And this is how we can differentiate between which remedy of this particular row of the periodic table does she actually fall under. Natrium are glum, melancholic and pessimistic. They feel that things will never be right again and so get stuck in the past. They keep their problems inside, they are extremely closed and they don't feel like talking about it. They have lost all faith that things could become all right again, and they have the inclination to withdraw. But when you look at this patient is nothing of the sort. She's not pessimistic. She's not withdrawn. She doesn't want to be alone. She in fact is the opposite of it. She wants to talk. She wants to be with people. She is extremely sympathetic and she is a fighter. She has come out of it. She has not got stuck in the past. So this patient is clearly not a natrum. If you look at phosphorus or the phosphoricum element in any remedy, they usually talk a lot and very openly. They communicate freely about the thoughts that live inside them. Phos is very sympathetic and they quickly take on other people's thoughts and feelings. But there is also an indifference in phos. And if you see if you observe very carefully in this patient, she spoke about how her husband does not care for her. But now she is quite indifferent to that. She's quite indifferent to that. She's quite indifferent to the fact that she was an unwanted child. So she has gone into that phase of indifference. Whenever we think of phosphorus as a remedy, the first things that come to our mind is that phosphorus is very cheerful, vivacious, loquacious, very open. She loves talking. She loves to be with people. But what we should understand and need to understand is why this type of personality has come about. The reason behind this personality. And that reason we can find in our Materia Medica books. So let's have a look at a Materia Medica book and see how phosphorus has evolved into what we feel that she is as a loquacious, cheerful, vivacious person. Now let's look at Soul of Remedies by Rajan Shankaran. To access this book, you go to the section on books and you click on reference books. You can also click Command B from the keyboard. So now in this, we need to look for Soul of Remedies. So I just type SOUL. The entire list of books drills down to those books that contain the word soul. There's just one book, which is The Soul of Remedies by Rajan Shankaran. Under this, we are looking for phosphorus. So click on the chapters and scroll down to phosphorus. And now we click on phosphorus. Let us read what is there in phosphorus because this is very interesting. The main feeling of phosphorus is of being unloved and uncared for, to which the patient reacts by being affectionate, friendly, and sympathetic, in the hope that this love and care will be reciprocated. He must be sensitive to the feelings of others to win their affection. The effort of phosphorus, therefore, is in the direction of caring for others and being sympathetic to them. So, now can you see it is like as if we are reading the case of our patient in this book. So she has evolved from a phase of being unloved, underappreciated, not given any affection, and now she has evolved into that phase where she is extremely affectionate to others. She is very talkative and she is very sympathetic. And that is why we know that this is the remedy for our patient, that phosphorus is the remedy that we need to give to our patient. So now the final prescription is phosphorus 1 mg in single dose and placebo for 15 days. Now apart from this prescription, since we know that she has anemia and she has obesity, we must tackle these two diseases as well. Okay, and this cannot be done with the medicine alone. We have to give her some form of supportive treatment in the form of do's and don'ts and in the form of diet instructions. Okay, so now let's talk about do's and don'ts. Okay, certain factors can prevent the correct remedy from acting. Certain factors can prevent the patient from going towards recovery. Certain factors can boost that recovery in its turn. So we need to give the patient those do's and don'ts for those conditions so that his recovery is quicker, faster and better. Okay. Now to have a look at these do's and don'ts, we have a very beautiful feature in Hompath called patient instructions. To access patient instructions, just click on the module of utility and click on the first option or the first feature, which is patient instruction. Now when you click on patient instructions, on the left hand side you will see that there are more than 600 clinical conditions whose specific do's and don'ts have been represented in Zomeo. Now we are looking for anemia, obesity as well as hemorrhoids or piles. So let me first type anemia. All right. And now you can see the specific do's and don'ts for anemia on the right hand side. You are able to view the definition of what exactly is anemia, what are the possible causes of anemia, what are the signs and symptoms of anemia, and finally, what are the do's and don'ts for anemia. So these instructions could be printed out and given to your patient as well. And it's very important that you give these do's and don'ts with the remedy. Otherwise, if there is any maintaining cause, then the recovery will not happen as much as you expected to happen, and you will feel that it is either your failure because it's a wrong remedy or it is the failure of homeopathy. Let's also have a look at the do's and don'ts for obesity. So again, in this search bar, I type obesity. We have specific do's and don'ts for obesity as well, along with what are the possible causes of obesity, what are the risks of obesity, which means in future what diseases could develop because of this obesity, and what are the do's and don'ts for this obesity or the instructions that the patient needs to follow. And let us see the do's and don'ts for piles. Alright, now when I type in piles, I see the do's and don'ts for piles on the right hand side. So these do's and don'ts also could be printed and given to the patient, and she could be told to follow them. So if you see, there are very useful do's and don'ts here. Don't strain at stool, avoid prolonged sitting at work, use moist wipes instead of rough toilet paper, okay, to minimize the itching and the pain. All right. So all of these very useful instructions can also be given to the patient. Now, if you see, I also mentioned about diet and nutrition, what is needed to be eaten. When we saw the patient instructions for anemia, there was a note on diet and nutrition as well. But if you think about it, anemia is due to the chronic blood loss because of piles, and the piles has happened because of constipation. So we need to correct that constipation through diet, after which everything else can be slowly corrected. So for this, in the utility section again, click on the second option of diet and nutrition, and here on the left where the clinical conditions are listed, we'll type constipation, and now you can see the diet and nutrition instructions or the dietary management for constipation, and these can be printed and given to the patient as well. So if you see, all of these things are necessary to be done along with giving your remedy, which is the right remedy, because all of these instructions will help and work together so that the remedy acts best. Now all of this was given to the patient. After 2 weeks, she came saying that the cramps in the legs were better by 20%, the breathlessness was better by 10%, acidity was gone, Eructations were gone. However, the ulcers in her mouth had aggravated. But even her bleeding PR was better by 20%, although she still passed hard stool. Appetite was still reduced because of the ulcers. So we repeated one more dose of phosphorus after 2 weeks. And then when she came, she reported an improvement in the cramps, in the breathlessness, and now even her ulcers had started improving. And if you see, she had lost 2 kilos weight, which means that she was following the diet and the do's and don'ts also that we had given her, and they had helped the remedy to act better. So now we did not need to repeat the remedy once more. Okay. So now we know that the bleeding had stopped for that period of time. So now we know that the anemia can now get corrected slowly. Okay. Another question that could come up, which is a very valid question, is why not simultaneously give this patient supplementation of iron? Okay, now there are two reasons why this patient was not given an iron supplementation. The first was that the anemia occurred because of chronic blood loss. So unless and until you correct the chronic blood loss, giving iron supplementation is not really going to help, because you will have to keep um, giving her the iron supplements until and unless the blood loss stops. And the second, if you carefully have seen the case history, she has a lot of gastric and digestive complaints. Now, iron supplements are known to cause gastric and digestive complaints like burning, acidity, sometimes nausea and vomiting, constipation. She already has these problems. If we had started her on iron supplements, all of these problems would have got aggravated. Now, a very interesting thing that I'd like to narrate is that when we were studying, we had to complete a dissertation in our final year. And one of my friends did a dissertation on anemia and the different types of anemia. So she had to go and she had to study all the different cases of anemia that walked into our hospital and clinics. And at the end of 1 year of research, when she finally submitted her dissertation, she made a very interesting discovery. The discovery that she made was that the hemoglobin count improved at a better level with the constitutional remedy rather than with supplements and biochemics. Now, this is a very interesting observation, because when you talk about supplements, when you talk about biochemics that act at a basic deficiency level, they try to correct the deficiency in the blood, but a constitutional tries to correct the deficiency right from the core. So the problem can be a blood loss, the problem can be a malabsorption in the digestive system, because of which even on having a proper diet, the nutrients are not getting absorbed well. The constitutional remedy helps in correcting that absorptive power or that malabsorption in the gut, and this is what helps to increase the hemoglobin count. Now another interesting question that could come up was that this patient is an obese patient, and phosphorus as a remedy, we know, constitutionally has been seen to be given in tall, thin, lanky females with delicate features. This is what has been given in a lot of our materia medica books. So constitutionally, if you see, the patient's constitution is contradictory to the remedy that was finally given to her. But I'll give you a very interesting observation. If you look at, now let us type in obesity, let us look for the rubrics that are there for obesity in all our repertories and see if phosphorus features in those rubrics. So Let's do a Command S again, and now I will type in obesity. Alright. Okay, for obesity itself, there are 1734 references. Now, let us look at a stalwart, an old homeopath for obesity. Let us look at the references of, say, Boric. Boric has just two rubrics for obesity. One is obesity, which is general, and the second is obesity in children. Now, the generalities obesity rubric has just 21 remedies in it. And if you open that rubric and see, phosphorus is present as a 3-mark remedy in obesity in Boric. So a clinical repertory like Boric has mentioned that phosphorus is a remedy that can be given for obesity. Now understand the importance of this rubric, because Boric is a repertory that has been made only after clinical verification of symptoms in actual patients. And that is why we have seen, and Boric has seen, that phosphorus is a very good remedy that can be given to patients who are obese. As an interesting point, natrimur does not figure in this rubric. Let's go in for say BBCR. Okay, even in BBCR, if you see, there are 4 references for obesity. If you see the 72 remedies for obesity that are given in BBCR, phosphorus is present as a 1-mark remedy. That means that phosphorus is a remedy that can be given to obese individuals. And as we also know, as given in Materia Medica books, that phosphorus has a hemorrhagic diathesis, and this is seen in this patient as well. That is why phosphorus is also a very good remedy for anemia. Let's look for anemia as well. So a Command S, we type in anemia. Let's again look for the references of Boger. Now in Boger also, if you see, phosphorus is there as a 2-mark remedy for anemia. If you look for Boric, that has got 17 references, 68 remedies for anemia, out of which phosphorus is a 3-mark remedy. So can you see how the remedy has fallen in place with even the physical complaints of this patient? The burning that she felt. So retrospectively, if you think, phosphorus is also part of Nash's trio of burning along with sulfur and arsenic alb. So phosphorus is, we can see, covering the entire plane for this patient, mental, physical as well as core. In 6 months, 3 more doses of phosphorus 1M were repeated. She experienced a weight loss of 15 kilograms in those 6 months. Very good for somebody her age. No cramps in the legs. Occasional breathlessness when she had exerted for long, because now anyway she has lost her weight. So the breathlessness will also come down because the pressure on the heart and the lungs will also come down. Bleeding PR completely stopped. Stools are soft and regular. And after 6 months, her hemoglobin went up to 11.2. Still not in the normal range, but good enough for her. So what is the learning that we see in this case? Ken's approach helped us in considering all the symptoms with their due weightage in the totality. This approach ensured that we do not miss out on any important symptom that can lead us to the remedy. We also learned to identify the core feeling or the state of the patient's mental status, even though it was not handed over to us directly by the patient during case taking. The patient's core feeling of being unloved or uncared for was masked by her extrovertedness, affectionate and caring nature towards others. We also learned to correlate this state of mind of the patient with the core of the remedy by studying the remedy theme in detail according to its placement in the periodic table. This study also helped us to differentiate between phosphorus and natriumur, since both the remedies covered almost all the symptoms in the totality. So thank you very much, friends. I hope that you have a lot of takeaway from this session. We'll meet in the next session now. Thank you and take care.